Pain has a strange way of entering our lives. It rarely knocks, it rarely announces itself. It arrives like a storm, sudden, intrusive, disorienting. And when it comes, it shakes the very ground we stand on. We ask questions we never asked before. We doubt things we once felt sure about. We feel exposed, vulnerable, uncertain. And yet, in the middle of that storm, something powerful is happening, something deeper than the pain itself. Because the pain did not come to destroy you, it came to reveal you. It came to expose the depth of your dependence on God, the strength of your spirit, and the reality of your faith. Pain has a way of stripping away illusions, removing the noise, and forcing you to confront what you truly believe about God, His character, His timing, His presence, and His promises. The enemy wants you to interpret pain as abandonment, but God intends it as revelation. This speech is not about avoiding pain, escaping pain, or pretending it doesn't hurt. It is about understanding the divine intelligence behind it. Because once you see what God is doing through your pain, you will never fear it the same way again. The idea that pain is a divine decoder challenges everything we naturally think about suffering. Most people see pain as an interruption, an enemy, an invader that must be resisted or escaped. But in the spiritual realm, pain functions very differently. It is not merely an unpleasant emotion or a physical sensation. It is a diagnostic tool revealing the true condition of the heart. Pain uncovers what comfort conceals. When life is peaceful, we can maintain illusions about our strength, our faith, and our control. But when pain strikes, those illusions collapse, and what remains is the raw, unfiltered truth of where we stand with God. Pain decodes our belief system. When fear rises in suffering, it reveals the areas where trust has not yet matured. When anger surfaces, it exposes expectations we never submitted to God. When confusion overwhelms us, it reveals how much we lean on our understanding rather than His wisdom. Pain becomes the interpreter, translating our inner world into clarity. It shows us the difference between the theology we confess with our lips and the faith we actually practice when everything is at stake. Many believers think they trust God, until pain presses them into situations where trust is no longer an idea, but a necessity. Pain also exposes idols, not statues, but internal attachments, our need for control, approval, certainty, or outcomes we can predict. When God allows something we depend on to be shaken, it is not to punish us, but to reveal that our confidence has drifted away from Him and anchored itself in the temporary. In those moments, pain becomes a spotlight, shining on everything that has taken God's place in our hearts. It reveals what we cling to for identity, security, and peace. This revelation is not cruelty, it is mercy. God exposes so He can heal. He reveals so He can restore. Pain reveals fears we never addressed. Sometimes it uncovers wounds from years ago, unforgiveness, abandonment, shame, or disappointment that we buried beneath routine and busyness. But when pain erupts, those suppressed areas rise to the surface, not to torment us, but to invite God into places we never allowed Him to enter. Pain becomes a doorway to inner healing, a summons to bring our brokenness into the presence of the One who already knows every fracture of our soul. Pain also reveals dependency. It shows whether we've built our life on self-reliance or God-reliance. In comfort, we may pray casually, seek God occasionally, and lean on our own strategies. But when pain strikes, those strategies fail, and we find ourselves forced to rely on a strength greater than our own. Pain teaches the language of surrender. It pushes us to trust God, not because we have to pretend everything is okay, but because we've discovered we cannot carry life alone. It exposes the illusion of control and replaces it with the reality of dependence on God's sovereignty. Perhaps the greatest revelation pain brings is about God Himself. Many assume pain distances them from God, but pain actually magnifies His presence. In suffering, the voice of God becomes clearer, His comfort becomes tangible, and His guidance becomes distinct. Pain strips away the distractions that drown out His whisper. It reveals that God is not just the God of blessings, but the God who sits with you in the fire. He is not absent in the storm. He is the one who commands the wind. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the instrument. It is the divine decoder that reveals, refines, and redirects. It exposes the truth not to shame you, but to shape you. It shows you where you are so God can faithfully lead you to where you're meant to be. Pressure has a way of revealing what precision truly means in the spiritual life. When everything is easy, faith can remain vague, undefined, and shallow. But when pressure enters, a crisis, a loss, a disappointment, a delay, it forces clarity. Pressure demands that you decide what you believe, why you believe it, and where you stand. God uses pressure not because He delights in your discomfort, but because He understands that without it, you would never discover the depth of the strength He placed within you. Pressure is God's way of sharpening you, shaping you, and tuning your spiritual senses to hear what you could not hear before. When life applies pressure, your priorities shift. What once felt important suddenly becomes irrelevant. Conversations that drained your energy fade away. The approval of people loses its grip. Pressure pushes you to focus on what actually matters: your relationship with God, your purpose, your values, and the assignments God has given you. It eliminates the trivial and magnifies the essential. In this way, pressure becomes a refining fire, burning away distractions and revealing the core of who you are. Pressure also produces spiritual precision by revealing what is real versus what is imagined. Many times, we invent fears that never materialize, build expectations God never promised, or cling to assumptions that have no foundation in truth. When pressure comes, those false structures collapse. Only what is anchored in God remains. This is why pressure is not the enemy. It is the filter that removes the unnecessary and leaves behind the unshakable. It forces your faith to become exact, targeted, and rooted in divine truth rather than emotional interpretation. God also uses pressure to train your discernment. In seasons of ease, voices blend together: your own thoughts, the expectations of others, cultural noise, and the whispers of the enemy. But under pressure, God's voice becomes distinct. Pressure makes you lean in. It forces you to seek God with intentionality rather than passivity. Suddenly, you are not just praying, you are listening. You are not just reading scripture, you are receiving. What was once background information becomes personal revelation. This sharpening of discernment is one of the most valuable results of pressure. Pressure also exposes spiritual immaturity. It reveals the areas where patience is underdeveloped, where pride still hides, where faith is fragile, and where obedience is inconsistent. This exposure is not meant to condemn, but to prepare. God cannot build your destiny on unstable foundations, so He allows pressure to surface the weaknesses that must be strengthened. He reveals the cracks so He can reinforce them with His grace. This process is uncomfortable, but it is crucial for future stability. Another outcome of pressure is dependency, not the weak kind, but the spiritual kind that recognizes God as the ultimate source. Pressure dismantles the illusion that you are in control. It confronts your strategies, your abilities, your timing, and your expectations. It pushes you to surrender self-reliance and embrace God-reliance. In doing so, pressure becomes the bridge between your limited strength and God's unlimited power. Without pressure, you would never learn how strong God can be through you. Pressure also prepares you for assignment. Every calling requires capacity. Every blessing requires weight-bearing strength. Every destiny requires resilience. God uses pressure like a spiritual gym, stretching your endurance, expanding your faith, and strengthening your character. What feels like burden is actually training. What feels like breaking is actually building. In the end, pressure produces precision. It refines your focus, sharpens your discernment, strengthens your faith, and prepares you for what God has already ordained. Pressure does not come to crush you, it comes to craft you. It is God's tool to transform potential into purpose and weakness into wisdom. Trust is never authenticated in seasons of comfort. Comfort can make us feel spiritually strong while quietly weakening our dependence on God. Comfort allows us to assume we have faith simply because nothing is challenging it. But crisis exposes what comfort conceals. When the ground beneath you begins to shift, when the prayers you prayed seem unanswered, when the situations you thought you understood unravel before your eyes, this is when trust is tested. Not by theory, not by emotion, but by experience. Crisis is the laboratory where trust is proven genuine. Trust is not a feeling. It is a decision anchored in the character of God. But you never truly discover the depth of that decision until something happens that contradicts your expectations. Moments when you cannot see a way forward. Moments when God feels silent. Moments when the enemy whispers that you've been forgotten. These are not signs of abandonment. They are invitations. Invitations to trust God beyond understanding, beyond sight, beyond the limitations of human logic. Trust becomes visible only when circumstances make obedience difficult. Anyone can trust God when the doors open quickly, when prayers are answered immediately, and when life aligns with desire. But when the doors stay shut, when the answers delay, when the path grows dark, that is when the authenticity of your faith becomes clear. Crisis reveals whether your faith was rooted in God's character or in your preferred outcomes. It exposes whether you were trusting God or trusting what He gave. In crisis, trust moves from verbal confession to spiritual conviction. You stop saying God is good because it sounds right and begin saying it because you've seen His goodness even when life wasn't good. You stop saying God is faithful because you heard it preached, and you begin declaring it because He held you together when everything around you fell apart. Crisis transforms borrowed faith into personal testimony. And this is why trust cannot grow in ease. Ease does not stretch. Ease does not sharpen. Ease does not deepen. It only comforts. But crisis forces you to cling to what is unchanging. It compels you to confront the truth that God's faithfulness is not dependent on your circumstances. His character is not altered by your pain. His promises are not weakened by your tears. Crisis refines your understanding of who God is, unchanging, unshakable, unwavering. Crisis also reveals the foundation upon which your life is built. If trust is anchored in circumstances, the moment those circumstances shift, your stability shatters. But if trust is anchored in the unchanging nature of God, then even in the storm, you remain grounded. This is why Jesus taught about the house built on the rock. The storm did not create the foundation, it revealed it. Likewise, your crisis does not create your faith. It exposes its depth, its strength, and its authenticity. In crisis, God teaches you to walk by faith and not by sight. Sight tells you what is happening. Faith tells you what is true. Sight changes with circumstance. Faith stands on eternal reality. Crisis forces you to choose which voice you will trust. And when you choose faith, when you choose to trust God even when nothing makes sense, you step into a deeper realm of spiritual authority. You begin to understand God in ways you never could during ease. Trust proven in crisis becomes unbreakable. It becomes the kind of trust that does not panic when storms come because it has survived storms before. It does not crumble when the unexpected hits because it has learned that God is the God of the unexpected. Crisis builds the kind of trust that can move mountains, silence fear, and withstand spiritual warfare. Trust is not born in comfort. It is revealed in crisis, it is strengthened in storms, and it is perfected in the very moments that seem designed to break you. But those moments in reality are designed to build you into someone who knows, not just believes, that God can be trusted no matter what. When God allows something painful into your life, it is never without purpose. Nothing slips through the cracks of His sovereignty. Nothing arrives by accident. Nothing touches you unless it first passes through the filter of His divine intention. This truth is easy to embrace when life is peaceful, but it becomes difficult when pain strikes unexpectedly. Yet it is in those very moments that you must anchor yourself in the reality that if God allowed it, He fully intends to redeem it. God does not waste pain. He does not allow suffering without weaving it into a larger design that ultimately leads to growth, revelation, and transformation. What feels like destruction is often the groundwork for divine construction. What looks like loss is preparation for a greater gain. What seems like a setback is positioning for a breakthrough. God sees the entire timeline of your life while you are standing inside a single moment. He is not responding to your pain. He already incorporated it into His plan long before you encountered it. We often interpret pain through the lens of confusion, but God operates through the lens of completion. He knows what this pain will produce in you. He knows how it will strengthen you, refine you, and shift you into alignment with His purpose. God also uses pain to redirect your steps. Sometimes the path you want and the path God has chosen are not the same. And in those moments, pain becomes a holy interruption. It closes doors you were never meant to enter. It removes people who were never meant to stay. It breaks attachments that would eventually break you. Pain is often the messenger God uses to realign your direction. Not because He is withholding something good from you, but because He is guiding you toward something better. Redemption begins the moment you decide to trust His rerouting instead of resisting it. Pain is also God's tool for deep healing. Many wounds in the soul go unnoticed until life applies pressure. Hidden trauma, buried disappointment, unspoken fears, unresolved grief, these things lie dormant until a painful moment awakens them. But when God brings these things to the surface, His intention is not to overwhelm you, but to heal you. Redemption does not mean God simply fixes what is broken. It means He transforms it into something stronger than before. God often allows pain to reveal what needs His touch, so He can restore what you didn't even know was damaged. Another dimension of God's redemptive purpose is preparation. Before God elevates you, He refines you. Before He expands your influence, He strengthens your character. Before He opens new doors, He fortifies your foundation. Pain becomes the training ground for the responsibilities that are coming. Without the lessons learned in pain, you would not have the wisdom, resilience, or discernment required for the next assignment. The very thing the enemy meant to weaken you becomes the very thing God uses to empower you. Redemption also involves testimony. God often allows you to walk through what you will one day help others overcome. Your scars become another person's roadmap. Your survival becomes another person's hope. Your breakthrough becomes another person's confirmation that God is still faithful. When God redeems your pain, He multiplies its purpose beyond your own life. The enemy's attack becomes fuel for your ministry. The suffering becomes a story of victory that glorifies God and strengthens others. Above all, redemption reveals God's heart. Pain can tempt you to misinterpret God's character, but redemption reveals His goodness. He is not the God who abandons you in the storm. He is the God who walks with you through it and brings you out stronger. He is not the God who wounds. He is the God who heals. He is not the God who destroys. He is the God who restores. If He allowed the pain, He will redeem the pain, and the redemption will be so complete, so intentional, and so powerful, that one day you will look back and realize the pain was not a detour. It was the very path that led you into God's purpose for your life. Pain has a way of making you feel abandoned, isolated, and forgotten. When suffering lingers and answers seem distant, the human heart often jumps to the conclusion that God has stepped back, gone silent, or withdrawn His hand. But pain does not signal God's absence, it reveals His nearness. The very moments when you feel the most alone are often the moments when God is the closest, working in ways you cannot yet perceive. Pain magnifies emotions, and emotions can be deceptive, but God's presence is not measured by how you feel, it is measured by His promises, His character, and His unchanging faithfulness. In seasons of comfort, God's presence can be subtle, felt in small blessings, moments of peace, or quiet joy. But in seasons of suffering, His presence becomes tangible. When your strength runs out, but you're somehow still standing, that is His presence. When you break down in tears, yet sense a strange peace holding you together, that is His presence. When you reach the end of your understanding, but experience a sudden clarity, that is His presence. Pain often sharpens your spiritual senses, enabling you to discern God's involvement in details you once overlooked. Pain also reveals God's protection. There are things God shields you from that you will never know about, but sometimes the pain you experience is not a sign of danger. It is a sign that God is blocking something far worse. Closed doors that devastated you were often doors that would have destroyed you. Relationships that fell apart may have seemed painful at the time, but they were God's way of redirecting you from harm. Pain can feel like a loss, but when viewed through God's eyes, it is often protection disguised. Pain exposes God's sustaining power, not the power that removes the storm, but the power that stabilizes you within it. There is a grace that only reveals itself when you are weak, a strength that only appears when you reach your limit, a peace that only manifests when your world feels chaotic. If life never pushed you to the edge, you would never discover the depth of God's support. Pain becomes the stage on which God demonstrates His ability to hold you up when everything else collapses. Another aspect of God's nearness in pain is His intimate involvement in your transformation. God does not observe your suffering from a distance. He enters into it. He shapes your character through it. He whispers guidance in the darkness. He aligns your heart with His purpose, even when you do not realize it. Pain becomes sacred ground because it is often in suffering that you encounter the deepest revelations of who God is. The God you know in pain is often different from the God you knew in comfort, deeper, closer, and more personal. Pain also teaches you to listen. When life is loud and busy, God's voice can be drowned out by noise. But when pain slows you down, when it strips away distractions, when it forces you into stillness, you begin to hear Him more clearly. His guidance becomes more direct, His comfort more intimate, His wisdom more vivid. Pain becomes the amplifier that makes His whisper unmistakable. Moreover, pain reveals God's compassion. Scripture does not portray a distant deity indifferent to human suffering. It reveals a God who is near to the brokenhearted, who stores tears, who understands grief, who comforts the afflicted, and who walks through the valley with His children. Pain reveals the heart of a God who does not simply command strength, He provides it. He does not merely demand endurance, He supplies it. He does not tell you to rise, He lifts you. Above all, pain shows that God has not left you. He is using the very thing that hurts you to hold you, teach you, and draw you closer. Pain is not a signal that God is gone. It is evidence that He is working at a depth you cannot yet see. And when the season ends, you will look back and realize that God was never distant. He was closest in the moments you thought He was farthest. Pain is rarely comfortable, but it is often constructive. What feels like destruction is often the very thing God uses to build your character, your resilience, and your future. The struggles that shake you are frequently the same struggles that strengthen you. God does not waste moments of suffering. He uses them to mold you into a person capable of handling the responsibilities, opportunities, and influence He has planned for your life. What breaks you is not meant to annihilate you. It is meant to awaken you to a greater capacity within yourself, a capacity only revealed under pressure and through pain. When pain strikes, it exposes the raw material of your character. It shows where patience is lacking, where faith is shallow, where pride still lingers, and where dependence on God is weak. These exposures are not meant to shame you, but to instruct you. They provide insight into what must be strengthened and refined. Pain is a tool for internal construction. Like a sculptor chiseling away stone to reveal a masterpiece, God allows experiences that feel harsh or unwanted to remove what is unnecessary, leaving behind what is essential for His purposes. What seems like breaking is actually preparation for building. Pain also develops perseverance. Endurance is not cultivated in comfort, it is forged in trials. When circumstances are challenging, you are forced to confront limitations and push beyond them. Pain stretches your capacity for hope, for faith, and for patience. Every time you face a trial and continue to move forward, your spiritual muscles grow stronger. This endurance becomes a reservoir from which you draw strength in future seasons of life. What you once feared would crush you instead becomes a measure of your ability to withstand, to trust, and to rise. In addition, pain teaches discernment and wisdom. Life's difficulties sharpen your understanding of God, people, and situations. When everything is smooth, it is easy to accept surface appearances and make hasty decisions. But in suffering, the truth is revealed. People's motives, intentions, and loyalties become clearer. Situations that once seemed straightforward reveal hidden layers. Pain cultivates insight that cannot be gained from ease. The lessons learned in struggle provide clarity that guides you toward better choices, stronger relationships, and deeper understanding of God's will. Pain also produces humility. It strips away self-reliance and exposes the need for God. Pride often thrives in success, in comfort, and in control. Pain demolishes the illusion that we are the ultimate architects of our lives. It forces surrender, a recognition that we cannot navigate storms alone. Humility born from suffering is fertile ground for spiritual growth. It prepares the heart to receive guidance, strength, and revelation from God in ways that ease cannot provide. Furthermore, the experiences that hurt us most often equip us for influence. God prepares you for your assignment through suffering. The very things you endure and overcome allow you to empathize, mentor, and encourage others. Your testimony becomes a light for someone in darkness. Your resilience becomes a map for someone lost in despair. Pain, when surrendered to God, transforms personal suffering into communal blessing. The struggles that seem personal are often preparation for a broader purpose. Finally, God uses pain to align you with destiny. Without trials, you may never reach the depth of understanding or the strength necessary to fulfill your calling. The pain is never wasted. It builds endurance, character, humility, wisdom, and faith. What breaks you becomes the foundation for the next stage of your journey. The very things that felt like obstacles become stepping stones. What seemed like damage becomes your design. Pain constructs what comfort could never create, shaping you into the person God intended you to be, strong, resilient, and prepared for the future He has already planned. Pain often signals the threshold of a greater assignment. It is a divine marker, a spiritual announcement that God is preparing you for something beyond your current understanding. Most people interpret pain as a barrier, a punishment, or a sign of defeat. But in the spiritual perspective, pain frequently indicates that God is about to expand your territory, deepen your influence, or reveal a calling you could not embrace without first passing through the fire. The very experiences that seem to weaken you are often the same experiences that ready you to fulfill a purpose far greater than yourself. Pain is not the end of the story. It is the prelude to destiny. God uses pain to awaken latent potential. We all possess abilities, insights, and callings that remain dormant until circumstances press against our limitations. Pressure, trials, and suffering are the catalysts that reveal the capacities hidden within us. Without these challenges, Potential may remain unrecognized, unrealized, and unused. Pain unmasks what is inside, showing strengths that were previously unknown and weaknesses that must be addressed. In this way, suffering becomes an essential tool for revelation, a way God ensures that when opportunity arrives, you are prepared to handle it with wisdom, courage, and discernment. Pain also signals that God is building resilience. Every calling, every assignment, and every influence requires endurance. No one can operate in positions of spiritual authority, leadership, or service without a foundation of perseverance. Pain tests and fortifies this endurance. It stretches the soul and refines character, allowing you to withstand challenges you would not have been able to face otherwise. The very things that feel like setbacks are actually exercises in spiritual preparation. What you endure now equips you to walk into your future without being shaken by circumstance or overwhelmed by responsibility. Furthermore, pain develops empathy and compassion. God often allows you to experience hardship so that you can minister effectively to others. The struggles you endure become a source of insight into the hearts of those who are suffering. Your story, your survival, and your testimony become tools in the hands of God to comfort, guide, and encourage others. Without your own experiences of pain, your ability to connect with and minister to people in their darkest moments would be limited. Pain prepares you to be a vessel of encouragement and a channel of God's presence in the lives of others. Pain also reveals timing and divine alignment. Often, people rush toward their goals, impatient for doors to open and breakthroughs to arrive. But God uses pain to slow us down, to redirect us, and to align us with His perfect timing. What seems like delay is often God's preparation. What feels like obstruction is often divine guidance. Pain signals that the timing is not yet complete, that there are lessons to learn, refinements to undergo, and character to develop before stepping into the next assignment. Those who learn to embrace this process emerge better equipped, wiser, and more capable of fulfilling God's intended purpose. Additionally, pain uncovers hidden gifts and spiritual authority. When you confront adversity, you often discover capacities for endurance, faith, wisdom, and leadership you never realized you had. These abilities remain largely untapped during seasons of comfort, but suffering draws them out, allowing you to exercise them and recognize their significance. Pain is like a furnace that forges spiritual gifts, ensuring that they are strong and functional when the moment of assignment arrives. Ultimately, pain unveils purpose. The very things that caused you to stumble, despair, or question your future are often the same things that prepare you for impact. God does not waste suffering. He transforms it into preparation, revelation, and opportunity. Every trial carries within it the seeds of destiny. Pain signals that you are on the path to something greater than you can see, that God is positioning you for a higher calling, and that your experiences, especially the painful ones, are not random but intentional. Through pain, God reveals a deeper assignment, one that aligns your life with His eternal purpose, prepares you for influence, and equips you to accomplish what only you can accomplish. It is in this revelation that suffering becomes not just tolerable, but profoundly purposeful.